Some dates, they're not just numbers on a calendar, right? They're these huge turning points. They literally slice history into a before and an after. And today, we're diving into one of the most famous and, yeah, one of the most complicated of all time. 1492. Just saying it, you can probably already picture it, right? It's a date we all learned about in school. It brings up this whole story of ships, a vast ocean, and this big discovery. But the real story? What that year actually kicked off? Well, it's so much bigger, so much more complex than what you'd see on a simple timeline. So, look, to really get the impact, we've got to go back to the beginning. We have to start with the journey itself. A plan that was so out there, so ambitious that most people thought it was completely impossible. A journey that seemed impossible. You really have to put yourself back in that time to get it. We're talking about the 15th century. The Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't like a highway with maps and GPS. For a lot of people, it was the literal edge of the world. So to suggest sailing west into nothingness, that wasn't just a plan, it was a crazy, monumental gamble. Okay, so the plan basically had two major parts. Step one, the pitch. You've got to convince the Spanish monarchy to shell out the cash for this unbelievably risky expedition. Then, step two was the goal. Find a brand new route to Asia by sailing west. The idea was to totally bypass those long, super dangerous trade routes over land. All right, so they set sail in August, but can you just imagine what it was like by September? Weeks have gone by. You see nothing but water day after day. The tension is just ratcheting up. Fear is turning into talk of mutiny. The crew is convinced they're literally sailing off the edge of the planet. And then, finally, in October, one shout changes absolutely everything. And that shout, well, that brings us right to the climax of this whole thing, the big moment. After all that fear, all that uncertainty, this impossible voyage, it actually arrives. Tierra, land. Can you even imagine the relief, the absolute explosion of joy in that moment? That one single word just sliced through all the weeks of tension, all the doubt. The impossible had just happened. And look, this is the part of the story we're all familiar with, right? This moment gets framed as the discovery of America, the start of a new era. It's all about triumph, exploration. But, as we're about to find out, that's really only half the story. Not even. Okay, so this is where we need to zoom out. This is where our whole understanding of 1492 has to get, well, a lot bigger. Because what happened next wasn't just a discovery. It was the beginning of something totally different. So let's just stop and think about that for a second. Was it really just a discovery? Think about that word. When you discover something, the idea is that it was lost or empty or unknown, right? But the thing is, the places Columbus landed, they were already home to millions of people. People with their own complex societies, their own rich cultures, their own long histories. So what you end up with are two completely different ways of looking at the exact same event. On one hand, from the European viewpoint, it's a discovery. It's finding a new world just brimming with possibilities. But if you flip the perspective, for the people who were already there, it wasn't a discovery at all. It was the beginning of colonization. It was the start of a process where new systems, new cultures, and a new kind of control were forced upon them. And that process, that colonization, wow, its consequences would ripple out across the entire planet, changing the world in ways that were both fundamental and totally permanent. So what did that transformation actually look like on the ground? Well, for starters, you had this massive clash of cultures. Two completely separate worlds that had been developing for thousands of years suddenly, violently collided. This kicked off brutal conquests for land, for gold, for resources, completely redrawing the map and shifting who held power in the world. And maybe the most devastating part, it unleashed diseases. Sicknesses that the native populations had zero immunity to, which led to a population collapse on a scale that it's hard to even comprehend. And these weren't just small bumps in the road. These changes were forever. And really, that's the key thing to wrap your head around here. The voyage in 1492, it did way more than just add a new continent to some European maps. It set off this incredible chain reaction that completely rewired the entire planet. We're talking economically, biologically, culturally, the whole shebang. For better and for a whole lot of worse, the world was never, ever going to be the same again. And that leaves us with this one final, really huge question to chew on. How can a single event, one journey that started with an idea that everyone said was impossible, how can it have the power to so completely, so irreversibly change everything? That right there is the incredibly complex legacy of 1492.